Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality podcast, is brought to you by eMenu Choice Point of Sale and Clark Pro. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Today on Tips from Trestle, I'm chatting with David Page. David is an acclaimed television producer and creator of the groundbreaking show Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and author of the book Food Americana. With a rich background in journalism and a passion for storytelling, David has now ventured into the world of podcasting with his latest project, Culinary Characters Unlocked. This new podcast, debuting on August 27th, features in-depth conversations with culinary legends and rising stars, offering listeners a unique glimpse into the world of food and its innovators. David, thanks for being back on the podcast.
Thanks for having me back.
So clearly, we're going to dive into everything about your new podcast. So let's just start with what inspired you to create Culinary Characters Unblocked, and how is it going to be different from other food-related podcasts?
Well, I was inspired because it's the next great thing in media. I started in radio, got into TV, then started writing a book, and now it's like going back to the future. Radio remains the most versatile medium in that, well, audio. You paint the pictures in your head, and it's a great venue for storytelling. And it's an opportunity for me to do something with food people that I haven't had a chance to do before, which is basically say, so let's tell your story and let's discuss what your view of everything culinary is. When I put someone on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, it was in the context of, hey, we're at your restaurant, make some stuff.
Yeah.
When I put people in my book, it was in the context of, we're discussing how America created a cuisine, so let's talk about the cuisine you're involved in. But culinary people are some of the most fascinating folks on earth. Their experiences, and more than that, their passions. These are people, if you're going to be successful in the culinary world, you have to care. You have to have a deep passion and a deep desire to please people, because otherwise you're just going to get blown out. It is a tough, physically demanding kind of work that requires a commitment to quality and perfection, if you're going to get it right.
Yeah.
And that is a money pit in many, many cases. I mean, the profit margin at restaurants is tiny.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks they can run one because they've cooked something in their kitchen at some point. Fact of the matter is, it's real easy to go bankrupt and real hard to be a success. So I find great stories in the history of folks who are successes in this world. And frankly, they have a lot to teach us and a lot to tell us. I mean, one of my first episodes is going to be with Dan Barber. If you don't know who he is, he's the owner of Blue Hill at Stone Farms and Family Meal at Blue Hill in Manhattan, and is on the absolute cutting edge of attempting to redefine the way we raise food and the way we eat. He is an absolute believer in flavor coming from local ingredients produced in an area that is conducive to them. He is not anti-meat. He thinks you can raise meat ethically and safely. But his pitch to folks is, first of all, eat differently. Small protein, lots of vegetables. Not vegetarian, not the traditional plate of a big hunk of protein surrounded by a little bit of vegetables. And he is on the forefront of redefining how what we eat. He has a seed company that is combating the hegemony, if you will, of 4 chemical companies that pretty much dominate the seed market. And he is raising food and even in some cases with his seeds creating new breeds that are supposed to taste good as opposed to all of the genetic work that has been done to make vegetables easier to sell, not easier to enjoy. I mean, tomatoes have been bred to be perfectly round, so you can put them in standard plastic containers. But that process has resulted in a food item that, for the most part, tastes like your foot.
Yeah. And telling those stories, I think, is so important. And so, uh, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about the way you're formatting the show. Like, how are you going to structure these conversations with culinary legends and up and comers alike?
Think of a great meal in Europe, not necessarily at an expensive restaurant, just a pleasant restaurant. When you're done with the meal, nobody kicks you out. In the US, they want to turn the table. Over there, after you've had a lovely meal, you sit, you schmooze, you talk a little bit. I want after dinner conversations with people from the world of food. The structure is let's discuss some interesting stuff. That's it. It's 30 to 45 minutes of the best of a conversation between me and someone I want to hear from and someone I think people will be interested in. My first episode is with Nancy Silverton. She is a legendary chef out of Los Angeles. She has a Michelin star. She's won the James Beard Award as best chef in the country, the James Beard Award as best pastry chef in the country, and the James Beard Award as owner of the best restaurant in the country. She's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I said to her, how'd you get into food? Did you grow up helping your mother in the kitchen? Was your mother a great cook? No, 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 no. She ended up in the food business, as many people do, through a circuitous path. She was in college. She got a crush on the guy who was cooking in the dorm. Apparently, they had a cafeteria in the dorm. So she asked him for a job, thinking that would open the door to them having a relationship. They had a relationship. It lasted briefly. But she looked up one day in the midst of it and said, I think I could cook for a living.
Yeah.
That to me, that's fascinating. One of the greatest chefs of all time, and she kinda stumbled into it. Those kinds of stories I find fascinating.
Yeah, that's very reminiscent of the conversations I have with chefs and culinary experts in senior living, right? We stumbled into it and found that passion to stay in this industry. So
Oh, but there's, senior living's an interesting culinary niche. My 106-year-old mother-in-law, and she is quite with it, still has a boyfriend. She lives in an assisted living facility in Florida. She was just up at our house for a few weeks here on the Jersey Shore, and she ate like a horse. When she went back home, my wife took her down, and my wife said, she didn't eat much again. And we've come to the conclusion it's because the food is crappy. Food in institutional environments, the word is bland.
yeah,
Yes, there are some people who need a bland diet for culinary reasons. Why feed that to everybody? Frankly, the older you get, it's my view, the more you would need and appreciate flavors.
yeah,
So when mom was here and I do the cooking, mom ate really well because she had basic good. I'm not a gourmet chef. We had pork tenderloin and roast chicken and pasta and pizza. But there was flavor there. There was taste there. I think food service being a way to save money is, I think, a detriment to the lifestyles and eventual longevity of many older people.
Yeah, our industry, there are pockets of it where we could do significantly better. I am excited though, because I literally just did a podcast about culinary competitions and being a judge for it. And the food that we had was amazing. And these were all chefs in senior living. And so the good news is that the tide is turning.
I
And
hope so.
yeah, and hopefully we can find a good chef for that community. where she's at. So one of the things that I'm curious about is, especially since we're talking about senior living chefs, what kind of insights and innovations from the guests that are going to be on Culinary Characters Unlocked do you think can be applied in senior living and to improve those dining experiences like we were just talking about?
Well, look, there's a number of things. First of all, one size does not fit all. There's got to be more diversity on these menus.
Mm.
Number two, it can't all be bland. Number three, focus on comfort food. You know, you don't lose your interest in the foods that you loved the older you get. In fact, to the extent that you're looking back on life and going through memories,
Mhm.
food's a big part of your growing experience. The foods you made for your kids are a big part of your life experience. I'd love to see more of that reflected. And I'd like to see more time taken with making things right. I cannot say enough, let me put it that way. Focus on basic, well made dishes. If you're going to serve a roast chicken, serve a good roast chicken. Don't bake the hell out of it because it's going to last on a sheet pan. If you're gonna serve hamburgers, patty it yourself. Yeah, I know cost is an issue, but there's a big difference between an institutional burger purchased for the lowest possible price and a
Mhm.
decent hamburger made from ground beef.
Absolutely. And all those little things can make a huge difference. And so you've mentioned some pretty impressive names. I mean, Dan Barber and Nancy Silverton you could categorize them as culinary legends, right? And so when
And you can characterize Drew Nieporent, who partnered with Robert De Niro to create Nobu and Tribeca Grill, or Marvin Lender, who, along with his brothers, made the bagel an American classic. Or Michael Stern, who, with his then wife, began explaining the availability of off the beaten path great eating to Americans through their famous road food guides. I've got Tony Gemignani, who is a 13-time international award winning pizzaiola. He is an international standard maker of pizza, which can either be a great food or not so great food. And it doesn't have to be white tablecloth. I mean, I talk at great length with Carol Lawrence, who owns the Red Arrow Diner in Manchester, New Hampshire, which you've seen on TV many, many times because it's the diner that all of the presidential candidates go to. And even out of the kitchen and other elements of the culinary world, I talked to Frank Ottamanelli, who is a third or fourth generation legendary New York butcher, who tells the story of a kid. As a kid, he would deliver meat to a particular customer's apartment, and one day the door opened and an attractive blonde woman was there. She invited him in, but he knew better than to go unescorted into some woman's apartment. Well, it turns out the apartment belonged to her husband, who was a famous playwright, and she was Marilyn Monroe.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that so many great names. So when you're looking for those guests, like how do you identify what you might call a future legend in the culinary world? How do you find these people that you think are going to make a difference?
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill to account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, E-Menu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. E-Menu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
Well, one of the ways, frankly, is the regional James Beard Awards. James Beard Awards are given not just nationally, but there's the best chef in the Southwest. There's the best chef in Mid-America. I just had a conversation with Christina Wynn, who won the 2024 James Beard Award for Best Chef in the Midwest for her Fusion Southeast Asian restaurant in Minneapolis. She's being noticed and on the way up. Another way is simply I'm a voracious reader of both the trade press for the culinary world and the popular press. You can get a good sense of who's on the way up by following food coverage in regional or city magazines. I say magazines, they're online now.
Yeah.
Or national publications like Eater. What I'm looking for when I read a piece in Eater, for example, about about birria. Let's say Eater chooses to write about that Mexican spicy stew that has become kind of a rage lately.
Yeah.
They'll mention chef so-and-so here and chef so-and-so there. Okay, that's going to indicate to me that these people are at least good enough that Eater took a look at them. Now I can do further research and decide if one of them is someone I want to talk to. There's a guy named Donald Young, and I don't recall how I found him, but I think it was an article about pop-ups. He does pop-ups and private affairs for people. But what caught my eye was that he was among the youngest winners of a Michelin star when he was 28
Mm.
at a restaurant where he was featuring dry-aged duck. Try finding that somewhere.
Yeah.
That's an interesting person from the world of food.
Those all are great sources. And the way you approach it makes so sense. It's like, let's go and find those hidden gems.
The best of the best.
Yes.
And by the way, I'm also looking for people who do a great culinary job and will never be legends. People who own mom and pops. There's a couple in West Lafayette, Indiana, Greg and Carrie Arisman, who own a hamburger stand called the Triple X Family Restaurant. I've had them on Diners. They're in my book. I love what they do. They are committed to the highest standards to produce hamburgers. They'll only cut their burgers from steak. They are fanatical, I guess, about the preparation. And they have their tricks. They throw a little vegetable oil on the grill, and then they dip each burger in a dusting of flour to give it a little more crunch. And they say it adds flavor. But I love the story of their restaurant, which is when they took it over. It's about 100 years old. When they took it over, they were getting phone calls asking if the staff was topless and what time the movies started. So they added family restaurant to what had formerly been just the Triple X. I love that story.
Yeah. Oh, great, great story. And so when through all of these conversations, the people that listen to my podcast they're wanting to do what my passion is, which is elevating that food and dining experience in senior living. And so what are some of the things that you've heard your guests talk about that could be trends or practices that they're doing that could make senior living better and really help some of these fellow senior living culinarians elevate what they're doing to not be on David Page's naughty list, if you will?
Treat the ingredients with some respect. I mean, there is no reason that steak in senior living cannot be produced using a reverse sear, which is simply a better way of cooking meat that doesn't turn the exterior 10 or 15% of it into an overcooked piece of leather. Treat ingredients with respect. Number two, treat plating with respect. There is nothing sadder than a salad no one gave a damn about. Salad comes out again in an institutional setting, often looking so sad. without the little bits and pieces that can elevate it, like the little curly cues of carrot or the dusting of cheese, or hell, even just some panko for crunch. Frankly, it boils down to treating food with more respect. It's not just an industrial commodity.
Yeah. Then that's what
And
I
by the
tell.
way, there's another element here too. We have become a more gustatorially adventurous country. And if you end up in an institutional situation, that doesn't change the fact that you are open to other things. Have a banh mi night.
Yeah.
Have a real taco night, not those crisp, pre-made, crappy taco shells, but give people a choice. We got tacos tonight. Do you want beef, chicken, or pork? It's not that hard. You can get all this stuff from Cisco. You can get all this stuff from US Foods. I'm not telling you have to buy ridiculously expensive ingredients or treat cheap ingredients better. If you want to buy the tougher cuts of steak, well, let's start braising them.
Yeah.
Let's do a homemade beef stew. Let's do homemade short ribs. Those are cheap cuts. You put them on the stove. You almost walk away. Just keep them on low heat and let them turn into something special. Now, I understand institutional environments, costs are number one. And I'm preaching to some choirs in which I say, in my opinion, it should be a higher priority, and frankly, should be dealt with as a higher priority by the people who license these institutions.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, my whole entire career is coming from hotels and restaurants and then moving into senior living, seeing exactly what you're talking about from where I first started and thinking, well, is not how this is done. This isn't the way food should be treated. And there are so many things and so many ways that we can tackle doing just the things you've talked about that I know many people in our industry are doing, but many more could definitely learn from. And
And
so,
by the way, it sounds like I'm beating the hell out of it. I'm not. I'm beating the hell out of bad institutional food.
yeah,
But I'll also be clear about something else. There is a demarcation line between luxury institutional living and the institutional living people's insurance will pay for.
yeah,
There is a growing sector, and I say this not as an institutional specialist, but as simply an observer. It appears to me that there is a growing lucrative niche for VIP quality assisted living or even nursing home living. And if you can pay for it, there are places that are making the quality of food a selling point.
yeah,
But if you can't pay for it, if you can pay what most of us can pay or what the insurance companies or I guess Medicare will let you charge, you can give people a decent meal.
it really goes back to I always refer to the 5-star hot dog. It's about the execution. It's about taking the right approach and doing the things you're saying where, the ingredients can be treated with respect and done the right way for sure. So,
And there's nothing better than a 5-star hot dog. No, that the hot dog's a perfect example of a relatively inexpensive item that can be tarted up 200 million ways. Give me a hot dog night and give me a regular hot dog and then my option of a couple of other regional hot dogs. One week it's a Sonoran dog. One week it's a Chicago dog. But if you're going to give me a Chicago dog, it better damn well be on a legitimate poppy seed bun with sport peppers, with bright green relish, with celery salt. A Sonoran hot dog, all you got to do is wrap a piece of bacon around it. It ain't that hard. It's
yeah,
it's the thing that I think is often missing is the passion and pride. When you talk to a chef that makes hot dogs, people who run a hot dog stand, people who run a good hot dog stand give a damn.
yeah,
First of all, they buy a good hot dog, which isn't that hard these days. There's plenty of good hot dogs out there. And then they treat it well. You want to do an Italian dog? I'm familiar with a particular Italian dog that's done this way. You throw some spinach and garlic into a pan, you saute them, and that's the topping for the dog. And maybe if you want to go nuts, you put it on crusty bread instead of a regular roll. Now, I don't own the balance sheet to any institutional culinary companies. I'm sure there are all sorts of price issues involved. But if you can't afford a good version of something, don't serve people a bad version of something. And by
Sort
the
of like,
way, don't undervalue the joy of dessert. I do not understand why I do not see in any senior living facility, when I say in any that I've been to, why isn't there a soft serve ice cream machine available for the residents to use at any time of day? My 106-year-old mother-in-law around 8 at night generally wants some ice cream. Now, she keeps hers in her freezer, but come on, folks.
yeah. No, that's funny you mentioned soft serve ice cream. That was early on in my career. Soft serve ice cream was one of the additions that we made to our program. Like you said, it's simple and easy, and it goes back to that internal love of the really good, simple things when it comes to food. So, as we wrap up, David, I wanted to ask you, what do you hope the listeners will take away from Culinary Characters Unlocked? And how do you see this elevating or contributing to the broader conversation around food and cooking?
Well, this is going to sound arrogant, but I hold intelligent and entertaining conversation. And you don't have to be a foodie to like this. Storytelling is storytelling. Broadcasting, which podcasting technically isn't, but it's the same thing. Broadcasting is a simple business in one respect. To have a successful program, you need to offer people someone they want to hang out with. That's it. That's why Anthony Bourdain was a success. That's why Guy Fieri's a success. That's why Beyond Culinary, that's why James Garner had so many successful shows. That's why Tyne Daly had so many successful shows. You just want to spend time with them. And the people I'm talking to are some of the most interesting people on earth. They've had phenomenal life experiences worth sharing. And almost as a bonus, if you care about food, there's a lot you can take away from these chats.
Well, David, thank you for coming on. How can my listeners find your podcast, connect with you, learn more about the work you're doing with Culinary Characters Unlocked?
Well, my website is PageProd Media, PageProd Media at gmail.com. The podcast, when it debuts on August 27th, will be up on culinaricharactersunlocked.com and also on every major podcast platform. You can get in touch with me through my website or the podcast website once it goes up. And you can find the podcast everywhere.
Perfect. David, thanks again for coming on the podcast a second time. I always love your spirit and your passion for what you do. And so I appreciate your time, and thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thank you so much, and help me get my mother-in-law some soft serve.
Can do.
Okay.
So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestle. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.